the right developer is like a unicorn in software. For example, in sales and marketing, you could have person A and person B is probably, 30%, 40% better than person A.
Right.
But in software, if you get a good developer, a unicorn, and he's person A in this case is going to be 5 times better than person B, not only because of the way they code, but because of the way they think.
Right.
Like if I go, let's do this feature. Like, are you sure you want this? Because if you do this, this happens. And although I don't know how to code, I've now started to think like a developer and think logically, because developers have to think not 2 moves ahead, 4 moves ahead. And so how that ties into the answer to your question is, I was born and raised in India. And so I can not only converse Hindi, which is my native tongue, but I can see through the BS with developers in India. And I was able to find developers that were unicorns. And so when the first software succeeded, which was an email newsletter marketing software, I said, you know what, I'm going to go head to head with the biggest players in the industry and build what's essentially a scheduling, documentation, and medical billing software, it's a huge undertaking. And, sort of struggled along the way. The struggle. My biggest competitor tried to sue me and put me out of business. Mm-hmm. But the short answer to your question is the decision to get into software was for 2 reasons. One, I had access to, and I know how to identify unicorn developers, which is the key. That one unicorn is better than having 5 average developers.
So how did you know that? Because you weren't in software.
I think that I instinctively have a sense of people, and specifically developers, because when you talk to a developer, you understand very quickly whether they're thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead.
Okay.
A good developer will say, "Why do you want to do this? Why don't we do it this way? And why don't we do it this way instead?" Whereas an average developer will say, "Okay, you want this? I'll get it done in 6 hours."
Did you have somebody that had done software development that was kind of helping you or mentoring you or giving you advice or consultation?
I did have a project manager, but I think I learned as I went along. Don't get me wrong, I've gone through my share of really bad developers.
Sure.
But I think it
like
becomes...
the one that took all the code from those other people.
Who tried to, yeah. There was no source code, but that's an interesting story, which is not fun. But I think that going through my share of bad developers and finding a couple of unicorns made it pretty game-changing. Because, Roland, a good developer can build you the next WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Can build you anything, and whereas a bad developer will just rely on your vision. So development is a very interesting creative process. And so for me, if I could find a good developer, which I did, and obviously if I could get recurring revenue, because that was my foot in through the door, I could make a name in the market. And then what we've started doing now is started graduating to services.
Yeah.
So, for me, honestly, it doesn't matter whether a client pays me $50, $100, $200 a month for my software. What matters is we get to do the service for them, which is, if you want, we can get into that. When I started the software, my end game was to start doing medical billing for doctors. So we become indispensable for them. We become a done-for-you service where we literally become sort of the foundation to their cash flow.
Okay.
So the software was an end game to the bigger picture, which is becoming an extension of their practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty long end game, but now that the software is stable, things are starting to pan out.
Okay. So for somebody that is thinking they might like to do a software, kind of development project, what would you advise them 1, 2, 3 stepwise to? They have no experience. They're just like you were back in the day.
Yeah, I think the good news with software is you don't need to know code. That's number one. Number two, you need to have an intuitive understanding of what your market wants, what the audience wants, and the best ideas are the simplest ideas. WhatsApp, for example, was a software that integrated cell phone numbers into messaging. There was a LinkedIn tool, I believe, called Rapportive, RAPPORTIVE. Yep. I think it was built by, if I'm not mistaken, somebody in India, just one developer, and it was a Gmail plugin that sort of pulled in their LinkedIn profile when you emailed them back and forth by Gmail.
I remember that.
I believe he sold it to LinkedIn for $1 million within a year or two of having it. So my advice would be, it's okay if you don't know code, but you need to have a really good idea that adds value to whatever is existing out there. Please don't do Me Too products, because you'll waste a whole bunch of time, effort, and money. I'm going to save you guys hopefully tens of thousands of dollars. Don't do a Me Too product. Your product has to be significantly better or something that no one has thought of before. And if you can come up with that idea, the next step would be to obviously get a good developer and then go to market with it. Because at the end of the day, this is all about how many users you have and how fast you can scale.
Right.
So I think it comes down to the idea and then finding the unicorn. Because there's a flip side to this. You could have an excellent idea, but if you have someone who's not capable of executing that vision from a development standpoint, then you're in trouble. And I don't believe in the concept of project managers. A lot of companies, give you a developer and a project manager. I think that the owner who drives the vision should work with the developer who executes and amplifies the vision.
Okay.
A project manager is like a third wheel who is needed when a company reaches a certain type of scale.
Okay.
But I think, even though right now we have 6 developers and I have over 200 people executing the service, we don't have a project manager. Mm-hmm. They converse directly with my customer support team, and we try and keep it lean, and we stay hungry, and we keep improving the code, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So where would you look for a developer today?
This is interesting. US developers are excellent, although my developers are overseas in India. I found historically that in India, you get a lot of technically strong people who are very strong at coding. In the Philippines, you get a lot of people who are excellent at customer support and, who can speak the English language, without a thick accent. A lot of my staff in the Philippines, they speak, you couldn't even tell.
Yeah.
So I would go to India for developers. I don't have much experience with other countries like Russia or Croatia and stuff like that.
Where would you look online, like if you were trying to find those people?
I would do Odesk.
Okay.
I think Odesk is good, and that's where I found some of my top developers. There are a lot of freelancing companies that will help you find developers. I used one a couple of years ago, but then their developer ended up contacting me after she left them.
Oh, okay.
So I think if I was a beginner, I'd begin on Odesk. And I think a good way to start with the developer, Roland, is if you have a simple project. For example, you say, build me a script that allows me to collect email addresses from LinkedIn profiles. This is just something I'm spitballing here. How fast can you build that script? And what is the best way to achieve the outcome? If you put out, and obviously I was spitballing, if you can have something that's specific to your niche. Let's say you're a real estate person, and you want a script that allows you to scan Google Places, I don't know, and pull up lists of local business owners, let's just say. And if you put out a request like that to Odesk and you say, look, I'll pay $500 to somebody who can do this in 5 days. Then you start to identify the developers who can get the job done quickly and who are hungry, more like a pre-qualification thing.
Okay. And then the ones that respond and do a good job, then you kind of go for the real project.
Exactly.
But okay, I like that. That's great advice.
But finding a good developer is the key, because once you find a good developer, they can pretty much execute on anything.
Okay.
So that to me is king.